The ancestral narratives are the same as the patriarchal narratives. Patriarchs is a more archaic word for fathers, in reference to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. However, since the matriarchs, or the mothers, are just as important to the narratives as the fathers, scholars prefer the more inclusive term ancestors. Genesis 12 to 50 comprise three-quarters of the book of Genesis. In Genesis 12, we leave the prehistoric realm of the primeval prologue and enter space and time. This is true history because people's names, the cities they lived in, and much of the geographical setting fit what we know about the land of Canaan from 2000 to 1000 BC. The ancestral narratives fall into two parts: the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in Genesis 12 through 36, and the Joseph story in Genesis 37 to 50. Joseph was the younger son of Jacob, and the chapters devoted to his life form their own self-contained narrative. Scholars call the Joseph story a novella, meaning a short story. In such an introductory course, we cannot survey everything. Instead, we will focus on the life of Abraham, since he is the one God first called. It is clear from Genesis 1 through 11 that sin is endemic to the world. Therefore, God will do something new in Abraham. This includes making a covenant with Abraham and his offspring, and through them redeeming humanity. Judaism has an expression for this concept of redemption: tikkun olam, repairing or mending the world. In Jewish thought, we are active participants in God's plan, collaborators with God to heal the world. This is not pie-in-the-sky thinking. It is practical and down to earth. This is why, for example, Jewish activists figured so prominently in the civil rights movement. If we want to change the world for the better, we must collaborate with God in bringing about change. Whatever you choose to do in life, work in the medical field, law enforcement, business, psychology, social work, whatever, God has called us to do our part in mending the world, and He started this process with Abraham. So who were the ancestors? You must know them for the quiz. There are 3 patriarchs and 4 matriarchs. Abraham is the first patriarch. He was originally Abram, but God later changed his name to Abraham. We will learn more about that in a minute. His wife Sarai later became Sarah. The second patriarch, Isaac, was married to Rebekah. The last patriarch was Jacob. God changed his name to Israel. His wives were Leah and Rachel. An Egyptian painting from the time of Abraham, found in a nobleman's tomb from Beni Hassan on the Nile River in Middle Egypt, depicts a caravan of Canaanite metalsmiths. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph would have looked like these men: black hair with pointed beards and a darker skin typical to the Mediterranean region. The colorful clothing indicates wealth and status. It is not daily wear. However, if you want to know what Joseph's coat of many colors looked like, this depiction can help. The story of Abraham begins in Genesis 11:27 through 32, when Terah took his son Abram, grandson Lot, and their wives from Ur of the Chaldeans up the Euphrates River, probably by boat, to settle in Haran. We don't know how long they lived in Haran, but while there, God tells Abraham to leave Haran and go to the land of Canaan. Some scholars believe that Ur of Abraham is not Ur in southern Mesopotamia, but another Ur in eastern Turkey, whose name is preserved in the town of Urfa. Its full Turkish name is Sanliurfa. This is a town I visited many years ago, and it is just 30 miles north of Haran. God begins Genesis 12 with a call. Now Yahweh, God's personal name, said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. God then makes a promise. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. I have indicated Abram's name and the word great in blue because we have a word play here. Abram, Avram in Hebrew, means great father. Thus, God is telling Abram that he will make the great father great. 5 chapters later, after he arrives in the land of Canaan, God makes a covenant with Abram. This is when God changes his name. This takes the form of another wordplay. God says, I am El Shaddai, literally, God of my breasts, but generally rendered into English as God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless. I will make my covenant between me and you, and I will make you exceedingly numerous. This is my covenant with you. You shall be the ancestor of a multitude of nations. No longer shall you be Abram, great father, but your name shall be Abraham, father of many. For I have made you the ancestor of a multitude of nations. Thus, God has now changed Abram's name from great father, who will be great, in Genesis 12, to Abraham, father of many, in Genesis 17. Today, Abram is recognized as the father of 3 great monotheistic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Truly a multitude of nations. God goes on to say, I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you. I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you throughout their generations, for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your offspring after you. And I will give you and your offspring after you the land where you are now an alien, all the land of Canaan, for perpetual holding, and I will be their God. Thus, God clarifies that the covenant is not limited to Abraham. It also extends to his offspring and their descendants. It is an eternal covenant and includes the gift of land. Remember that God's covenant to Abraham in Genesis 17 promises 2 things, offspring and land. The sign of the covenant will be the circumcision of all males. God said to Abraham, This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. Just as the rainbow was a sign of God's covenant with Noah, circumcision was the sign of God's covenant with Abraham. This illustration of Egyptian youths undergoing circumcision proves that Israelites are not the only ones to circumcise. However, they are the only known group to have circumcised male infants. So what exactly is a covenant anyways? Well, the Hebrew word brit means covenant, and it comes from a root meaning to bind or fetter. And by this term, it means it's signifying a relationship based on a commitment, usually formalized as a verbal or written contract, and often involving an oath. Other English words that capture the same idea of a covenant are treaty, compact, or agreement. Sometimes a covenant is accompanied by a sign, such as a rainbow in the case of Noah, or circumcision, as in the case of Abraham. A common misconception is that God's covenant with Abraham only involved the Jewish people. However, in the same chapter, God also makes a covenant with Ishmael, father of the Arab peoples. Here's what God says. And Abram said to God, Oh, that Ishmael might live in your sight. God said, No, but your wife Sarah shall bear you a son. and you shall name him Isaac, meaning he laughs. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will bless him and make him fruitful and exceedingly numerous. He shall be the father of 12 princes, and I will make him into a great nation, referring to the Arab peoples. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, who Sarah shall bear to you at this season next year. Let us finish with a few slides about Isaac and Jacob so you know why they were important. Their stories are in Genesis 25 to 36. The story of Isaac begins with this statement. This is the account of Abraham's son Isaac. Probably the most famous story about Isaac is what we Christians call the near sacrifice of Isaac. However, in Judaism, it is called the Akedah, or the binding of Isaac. Jacob would be Abraham's grandson. He is best known for his dream at Bethel while on the way to his ancestral home in Haran. When Jacob arrives at Bethel, a name that means house of God, he falls asleep and has a dream where he sees angels going up and down a staircase. We call it Jacob's ladder, but the Hebrew word sulam actually refers to a staircase like those on Mesopotamian ziggurats. In another story involving Jacob in Genesis 32, he wrestles with a divine being at the Jabbok River, a being that later turns out to be God. One outcome of this struggle between God and Jacob was that God renamed him Israel, meaning God rules, or one who strives with God. As a result, all of Jacob's descendants are called the people or children of Israel, or the Israelites. We now conclude our lesson. Thank you for your attention.